Don't worry about the technology in the first place. Worry about process. Having multi-factor authentication is in any event better than having just username and password. The question becomes, how do you map access rights? Hi, this is Carsten from Hacking Matters, where each week we discuss the best practices in cybersecurity. Today we continue the discussion on the 5 baseline processes in security. You might have seen some of the other videos already. Now it's time for identity management. Identity management becomes ever more important. We hear identity is the new parameter. I personally think it's not the new parameter, it's the remaining parameter. It was always a parameter, meaning it was a possible way for attackers to break into organizations. The other ones, though, were more front and center of the mind in the past. The network needed to be secured, the endpoint needed to be secured, the cloud needed to be secured. But now that we have technical controls who can do that more or less when implemented well, for many organizations, identity is the remaining puzzle to be solved, and we will start solving it today. In your identity management journey, you want to go through 4 steps: federating identities, securing access, consolidating access to different applications, and finally, refining access rights, hopefully in a decentral, zero-trust manner. Let's go through each of them in turn. First, you want to federate identities, meaning you want to give a single identity to each person that is applicable in your entire organization as much as possible. But speaking about just normal users, one identity to access everything. That's partly a technology question. You need an identity store. Most companies inherited, for instance, Active Directory. Some of them have more modern cloud-based identity providers. Whatever you choose as your identity store, make it one identity store and one identity per person. The exception to that are administrative users. They have 2 identities, one for normal activities like browsing the internet, accessing email, and a second identity for administrative activities. Super user, things on Linux, domain admin, things on Windows. Those need to be separate identities from your normal account. But unless you're an admin user, you have one identity to access everything. When companies start thinking about identity management, they often try to find the best technical solutions. In my experience, the solutions don't differ all that much. Even with Active Directory as your identity store, you can build something secure enough. So don't worry about the technology in the first place. Worry about process. You need to optimize for having simple onboarding, offboarding processes. So whichever processes fit the best into your organization, use a technology that supports them. And if it's Active Directory, it's Active Directory. If it's something cloud-based, more modern, switch to that. If you can have quick onboarding and offboarding of users, especially the quick onboarding takes away any reason not to have a federated identity. You have new colleagues, onboard them. Colleagues are leaving, contractors are leaving, offboard them. So the identity store is always an accurate, up-to-date representation of whoever needs to access your systems. That was the first step, federating. And really, it should be the first step in your journey, getting the processes right around onboarding and offboarding into a single identity store. Now let's come to something more technical, securing access. And this is what most people worry about when building identity and access management solutions, how to make sure that identities cannot be phished or otherwise social engineered. And now we're talking about multi-factor authentication. Username password clearly isn't enough anymore today, but even many multi-factor authentication systems are insecure in many ways. But obviously, having multi-factor authentication is in any event better than having just username and password. So even if you have to resort to a somewhat less secure option in the beginning, do that now rather than waiting for an even better solution to arrive on the market. Text messaging is generally considered the lowest security multi-factor authentication. Still better than no multi-factor authentication, but insecure because mobile networks and their legacy technology in many circumstances are hackable, and hence the second factor becomes hackable as well. Better than that are authentication apps on the phone. The phone doesn't directly authenticate end-to-end. So the third tier then are hardware tokens that you usually connect to USB and that allow the authentication between one hardware in your computer versus a chip or a certificate on the server side. So that's the least convenient because you have to carry another piece of hardware and connect it, but the most secure, right? So if you can migrate from where you are today, let's say, text messaging to an authentication app, that's great. And then for power users, administrative users, for instance, definitely enforce hardware tokens as the currently de facto best standard for secure access. Now we federated our identities, we secured access through multi-factor authentication. What's next? Consolidation. You will now start working down the backlog of other authentication methods. You'll have all kinds of business applications or even cloud applications that are not using your authentication and your identity systems. You need to bring them into the fold so that the one identity really is the only one that people need. And that can be difficult for some legacy applications. But fortunately, there's a technology that will help you out called identity-aware proxies. Basically, you put a proxy, a reverse proxy, just in front of this old application, and that proxy server decides whether somebody is properly identified and authenticated, and then gives access to the application behind it. So the application itself doesn't have to change at all. You just have to basically allow this proxy to access the application, and then users access through the proxy, right? Identity-aware proxies, if needed. Of course, your main preference is to just use single sign-on and other federation technologies to just connect all the applications using native means. That was just the consolidation of access, so that really that one federated identity can access everything. Now that you have everyone on this one identity system, the question becomes, how do you map access rights? And you can either do this purely centrally, that there's some admins that you have to ask for permissions. That's the traditional way. It doesn't scale well, and it tends to become insecure because people accumulate access rights. Nobody goes to the admin and says, can you please take away an access right from me, right? So you just have more and more and more access rights. So the preference today is more in the spirit of zero trust, that you decentralize decision-making. Different teams are responsible for different applications or data sets, and they should be able to regulate who accesses those applications and data sets. And decentrally, you have much more visibility. You know when people don't need access anymore because maybe they left your team, or they have a slightly different responsibility now where they need different access rights, which is both more and less at the same time. So responsibilities can be shifting over time. So whichever way you go, either centrally having a few admins regulate all your access rights, or decentrally, or maybe a mix thereof, you need to review access rights regularly, of course, right? That, again, is easier if you have it decentrally because people know who needs access what, whereas an admin who's just working additively has a harder time. But that's the final security responsibility. So after bringing everyone onto the same system, securing this with multi-factor authentication, making sure all applications can be accessed, really the main work in identity management is what we call rule-based access control, basically continuously reviewing and refining who has access to what, and trying to use as much automation and rules as possible, of course, but making sure that human reviews are present at least, let's say, twice a year. There you have it, your first months in identity management. We touched on a number of other subjects. For instance, zero trust, which we have a separate video for. Go watch that if you're curious about it. And of course, this identity management is one of the 5 baseline security processes that we're discussing. You can also watch the other ones, being patching, hardening, backups, and vulnerability management. If you have any comments or questions, let us know in the comments below. And until then, happy hacking.